So I got a few comments asking about the 72-year mortgage that I showed in my first housing bubble chat video, including a mortgage broker that says what I was saying was incorrect. And you know what? Fair enough. I had to leave out a lot of important details because the video is only 3 minutes long and I can't go into everything when I'm trying to make a different point. To be clear, I do already know about mortgage rules, including terms and renewals and rework. But in my opinion, the more you know, the worse it gets. So let's get into it. This person has what's known as a variable rate fixed payment mortgage, which means that if interest rates go up, the bank charges you more interest, but your payment stays the same. So more of your payment is going to interest and less is going to paying down the loan. So 72.5 years is how long it would take this person to pay down their existing mortgage at their existing payment. But will they actually be paying down this mortgage for the next 72 years? Under the current rules, no. When they reach the end of their mortgage term, usually 5 years, they'll have to renew with a new payment amount and schedule. Because interest rates have gone up, they'll have to increase their payment, and under the current rules, they'll also have the option to extend their amortization to 25 or 30 years depending on how much equity they have in the home. So what would that actually look like? I made this mortgage calculator spreadsheet so I could back calculate some details about their mortgage based on the info on the bill. Right now they've got just under $1.3 million in debt left, and they're a little less than 4 years into the mortgage, assuming this is a 25-year amortization. At their current interest rate, almost 98% of their payment is going to interest, so when they renew next year, they'll only have a little bit less debt. If they want to keep their schedule the same and pay down their mortgage over the next 20 years, they're going to have to increase their payment to over $8,700 a month. But if they can't afford that, they could extend their amortization out to 30 years past the renewal date, and their payment would be about $7,150 a month. That means they'd be paying over $1,300 a month extra just to set themselves back 10 years on their mortgage, and they're only 4 years in now. It also means they're going to be paying about $1.2 million more in interest over the course of the mortgage than they had initially planned for. To be clear, this is also a concern for fixed-rate mortgages that are coming up for renewal. Unlike in the US, where you can get a fixed rate for the entire length of your mortgage, in Canada it's only fixed for a certain term, usually 5 years. So anyone who bought near the peak with low rates and now is renewing is still going to see a big hike in their payments. I'm starting to run out of time for this video, so I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to split it into 2 parts, but I'll post them back to back in the playlist so you don't have to wait to watch the next one. And don't worry, it gets worse. In the last video I talked about that 72-year mortgage and how it's not really 72 years, but the person is still going to be paying a lot more for a lot longer. But now let's talk about how these variable rate fixed payment mortgages apply to the broader Canadian market. The Bank of Canada estimates that these type of mortgages make up about a quarter of all the mortgages in Canada. They've been getting more popular in recent years because they have lower initial rates, which lets you qualify for a bigger mortgage, which lets you bid more on a house. And surprisingly, this person, who would need over 72 years to pay down their mortgage at their current payment, is actually doing better than most of the people with this type of mortgage. When your interest rate rises so much that your monthly payment only covers the interest and doesn't actually pay down the loan, that's called the trigger rate. When you exceed your trigger rate, what happens next depends on the lender. You might have to increase your payment, or they might just take the extra interest and tack it onto your principal. So you still make your payments every month, but the amount that you owe is going up and up and up. 6 months ago in October, the Bank of Canada estimated that 50% of these mortgages, or 13% of all the mortgages in Canada, had already reached their trigger rate, and that by the middle of this year, that number would be up to 65%, or about 1/6 of all the mortgages in Canada. So 1/6 of all mortgages in Canada are either not being paid down at all, or are actually increasing their debt over time. And many of these people already maxed out the monthly payment they could afford in order to buy a house at the peak. Under normal circumstances, this would push a lot of homes onto the market through forced sales after defaults and foreclosures. And this would lead to a drop in prices because new buyers coming in with new mortgages wouldn't be able to borrow as much, so they wouldn't be able to bid up the prices of the houses as much as they have in the past. The people who bought at the peak would lose money, the banks might lose some money, but prices would have to fall. But in the latest budget, the government has announced that they're going to loosen mortgage rules again in order to prevent foreclosures. This means more options at renewal for existing mortgage holders, including longer amortizations. They haven't announced what the new rules will be yet, but it's pretty likely that they're going to allow longer amortizations for everybody, including people with high ratio mortgages. Especially because home prices fell over 15% in the last year, which means that a lot of people who bought at the peak might not have that much equity in their home to rely on. This means that people will be able to keep their homes, but they won't be able to afford to move to a new place with a new mortgage, so they'll be stuck paying banks more interest for a lot longer. The new rules will help to keep prices high and inventory low, which is why I'm skeptical when the government calls it a housing affordability measure. They're not really making housing more affordable because they're not doing anything to change the supply and demand in the market. They're just infusing more cash into the buyer side through looser mortgage rules. That doesn't make housing any more affordable for people trying to get into the market. It just sets a price floor and keeps prices from dropping to protect people who are already in the market. The people who benefit the most from this aren't individual homeowners. It's people who have a lot of wealth tied up in residential real estate. That generally means multiple property owners, landlords, and people who treat housing as an investment. But by protecting those owners, you're making it harder and harder for young people to get into the market.